what happens in detail in the first 2 episodes?
Well,
I think literally the only thing we're allowed to tell you is, the Doctor is played by Matt Smith. Thank you for coming. Like, that's pretty much all we're allowed to say. But, so tell us a little bit about traveling to Utah and what it was like. I mean, the first time that the Doctor has actually come to America.
Set foot on American soil. Yeah, it's great. You know, I mean, it's just a totally different scale here. I mean, you realise why wide lenses were invented for filmmaking, because it's so big. Over in the UK, we use wide lenses to make things look bigger. Over here, we use it just to get the big things into shot. You know, it's just huge. And Monument Valley is that one of those great sort of iconic landscapes that we've seen in so many things. And I needed to say in one shot where we were, that we weren't cheating, we weren't somewhere in Europe, we weren't somewhere in Spain pretending to be America. We were in America, we're doing this for real. And that's Monument Valley. You know.
America's bigger on the inside. And then Mark Sheppard, who, I mean, geez, Mark, why don't you just be on every great sci-fi show ever?
The career's not over yet.
How did you get involved with who?
They asked me. And just like Toby, I jumped 35 feet in the air and said absolutely. And I mean, it's the gig of a lifetime. I've always wanted to be on Who, and as I got a little bit further up in my career, I was, you know, oh, maybe I'll get closer. And then Doctor Who just kept getting bigger and better and bigger and better. And I was like, I'll never get a chance to do this. And when the call came, I was like, oh, with bells on, I will be there in seconds. And I nearly didn't get to do it. I was actually shooting Supernatural at the time. And a couple of people have seen that.
Yeah.
The wonderful producers who, you know, there was a date conflict, and suddenly somebody turned around and said, well, are you working right now? And I went, well, no, I'm not working for the next 10 days. I said, can you come out tomorrow? And they flipped the schedule completely on their heads, and that's how we managed to do it. And the experience of a lifetime. Incredible, incredible experience.
I mean, is there anything at all that you're allowed to tell us about your character?
He's American.
He's American.
I travelled to England to play in America. I travelled to Cardiff to play in America. Just came back to shoot here. It was like...
Well, I thought you were American, and then I was really worried. What have we done?
It's like, hold on, he's got a funny voice.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of this stuff yet either, so I have as much information as you guys have, so all I have is just the image of Nixon in my mind saying, there are no monsters in the Oval Office.
What a line.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, what the hell is that about? So, I mean, what, were all the actors, who's the guy who's playing Nixon?
Stewart.
Oh, it is Stewart.
Yeah.
He looks fantastic.
He looks amazing.
Yeah.
Currently doing Jersey Boys. He was on stage with Jersey Boys at the time. He goes back to the days of, he was around my dad when my dad was working in London. He was always around that time as well. And I've known him indirectly for years. What a fantastic actor. And Nixon is scary.
Yes.
Talk about Stephen Moffat writing monsters.
So Neil, you were not involved in the first 2 episodes, but I hear tell that you have written the 4th episode, which is entitled "The Doctor's Wife," which hopefully, well, you have all this knowledge in your head that if I could just crack your brain open, I would be so satisfied. Are we getting some answers? Can you hint that we might get this answer about River that we keep wanting to know, or what's going on with your episode?
Yeah, it's called The Doctor's Wife. Let's see, what can I tell you that I won't get into trouble for? Did I mention that it's called The Doctor's Wife?
Yes. All right, good.
You've got that one down there. It's episode 4.
It's on BBC America.
On BBC America. It was going to be episode 11 at the last season. And, but I got this sad email as they started shooting the last season where, or when they were actually getting up to the point where they would have been shooting my episode, which said, "We've run out of money." And so we're going to make the lodger instead, because we can do that in a flat round the corner. And we can't make your episode in a flat round the corner. But we promise that we will actually spend the money on it in the next season. And they did. They took other episodes out round the back of the bike sheds and beat them up and took their dinner money. They gave them to my episode. And the biggest, strangest thing I had to do on the rewrite was, of course, when it was going to be episode 11, Rory didn't exist. That was during Rory's transient non-existing bit. So suddenly getting Rory back meant that I had to do a draft of the script, which was actually so much more fun. I was so grumpy at the idea of having to rewrite it, and then I discovered that I could write these great lines for Rory, and Rory and Amy together, which I didn't have before, so... one of my favourite bits, just that whenever I see the episode, it makes me smile, because it's something that I always wanted to say, and couldn't have done without Rory, is a bit where Amy tells Rory off for leaving... She tells Rory off for leaving the Doctor on his own, and Rory said, "Boy, he's a Time Lord. He'll be fine." And she looks at him with infinite compassion and she says, "Rory, it's just what they're called. It doesn't mean he actually knows what he's doing."
So how did each of you? What was your sort of affair with Doctor Who growing up? And like Toby, how did you first come across it?
Oh, it was massive for me. I'm dyslexic and I didn't read, and I was really struggling at school. And the likelihood of me doing any reading off my own back was just not going to happen until I picked up a Doctor Who book, and it had Tom Baker on the cover. It had some Daleks. Destiny of the Daleks, and I picked this book up, and it was the first book that I read unassisted from beginning to end, and that was the beginning. And so suddenly, but the thing was, you see, then it meant that I had an excuse to buy more Doctor Who books, and my mum would sponsor it, and so I'd come to school and I'd have this little stack of Doctor Who books. After a while, I stopped reading them, just collected the covers, because I like the covers, and stuff like that. But no, I was obsessed about it, and I even had I was just thinking about it last night. I had a Dalek costume. That
a full Dalek costume?
Well, it was from the 60s. I'd found it in an antique shop where I was growing up, and I did this little photo play thing where I painted a Dalek spaceship with me coming out of it in this Dalek costume, my brother shooting at me and exterminating me, which was very satisfying.
Are you giving the plot to the first episode then?
Obviously the effects got slightly better. But yeah, and then I used to make Fimo figures of all the bad guys and things like that, and then I kind of, Doctor Who sort of, as I sort of grew up, I got more into film and TV and things like that. Doctor Who took a bit of a sideline until I, started making the show. And suddenly I realised I had this huge resource of knowledge about the show and kind of about monsters and how to treat those monsters and what I loved about them and what I knew the fans would love about them. And so, yeah.
How do you guys? I mean, I guess this is for Neil and for Toby. How do you guys work in a universe that essentially has had, 47 years worth of episodes, and they're just a seemingly infinite number of storylines, and how do you stay consistent and work within that world? Does someone tap you on the shoulder and go, "Well, you can't do this because in this episode this happened," and how do you write like that?
Okay, there's a bunch of answers to that, all of which are true. The first one of which is I saw my first episode of Doctor Who. I was 3.5, and it was William Hartnell.
Oh wow!
And he wasn't really my doctor. I was sort of a bit scared of him. I was as much scared of him as I was of the monsters. But Patrick Troughton, by the time I was about 6, was my doctor. And I watched Doctor Who back then whenever I could, and it was formative. Somebody this morning, in one of the interviewers, recording things into your face and asking you strange questions, and somebody said to me, "Well, you always write about mythoses, and you know mythologies, you write about mythologies, so is there a mythology in your show? I'm saying, well, yeah, but before I ever discovered the Egyptian, or the Greek, or the Norse, or the Aztec mythology, I knew what a Dalek was. I mean, this, you know, I couldn't tell you what the initials for TARDIS stood for back then. Time and relative dimension in space. You know, I used to worry about red Daleks, because I had a copy of Dalek World, which was one of these glorious annuals.
Is that where they pose nude?
Actually, I would have loved a new Dalek, because you would have seen inside.
That's where they expose the little squiddy creature inside.
Miss Zap is the exterminator of... So, and it would talk in there at one point about the fact that Daleks couldn't see the colour red. And I worried, because there were red Daleks. And I had this horrible vision of these Daleks going, oh my God, what was that? These bumps are just floating in the air. And, you know, and this is the kind of stuff I think about when I was 6 or 7.
But that's the good thing about Doctor Who, you can know more about it than your parents do.
Absolutely.
The only thing that you know more about than your parents do when you're sort of growing up, and you can tell them.
I loved that. I loved the fact that I had this huge body of knowledge to draw on when I started writing my episode. But the other thing about writing Doctor Who is you're always absolutely aware that on the one hand, you have 47 years worth of cool stuff to plunder, and on the other hand, somewhere in the universe, there are lots and lots of really bright 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 28-year-olds, and 50-year-olds for whom this is going to be their first ever episode. And you don't want to let them think anything. You want to tell them the simplicity of the Doctor Who mythos. People are intimidated. They think that there's 47 years worth of stuff they need to know before they can enjoy anything. And what you want to say is, no, look, there is a blue box. It's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It can go anywhere in time and space, sometimes even where it's meant to go. And when it turns up, there's a bloke in it called the Doctor, and there will be stuff wrong, and he will do his best to sort it out, and he will probably succeed, because he's awesome. That's all. Now sit down, shut up, and watch Blink.
So, Mark, what was your exposure to Doctor Who?
I remember seeing Troughton, but I remember really seeing Pertwee. And Tom Baker was my doctor. I mean, that was the deal. That was a great era of Doctor Who, and it was something you sought out, and something you watched, and something you got to own. I remember, I loved the Daleks. I mean, I wanted to be a Dalek. I wanted to be Davros more than anything else. You were in that Dalek. There's a photograph of him inside a Dalek.
Trying to make a Dalek wave is quite difficult, by the way.
And there's a prop man.
I have never posted the photograph on Twitter or on my blog of me cuddling the Dalek, just hugging it. No, I posted the photo of me with the weeping angel just behind me, but the photo of me locking this red Dalek in a giant hug is never. That one's just for me.
You know the ones that scared the out of me was always the Cybermen. It was
the silent Cybermen.
Yes, the faceless. The original ones. I had a black and white TV at that time, and I just remember being absolutely terrified by them. And what I think is so fantastic about Russell's reincarnation of this and retooling of this, and now Stevens, is they preserve that one thing, which is to scare the living you-know-what out of us. I mean, and that is fantastic. It is all of these things that we've been talking about. The one common denominator is the stories are great. The storytelling is fantastic. Yeah. And that resonates with us as fans. It was done in a cheap and ungainly way, in a very cynical way, without much love. We don't really like it, we don't really enjoy it. But when it's done with as much passion as Who, and it's done with as much passion as those other shows that we love so much, which will remain nameless, we can sense it, and we latch onto it, and we love every minute of it. I mean, who is literally a work of love? Because it ain't a work of money. It's a work of love. It's a work of love and passion. And it shows. It really does show. And I got to tell you, Matt Smith is my doctor.
Yeah, he's...
let me throw something in on that. Matt is amazing. I used to write stuff for Matt, and he brought it in better and deeper, sometimes funnier, always odder than I ever have dreamed.
I mean, to have Chris Eccleston to open that up, and then fantastic. David to bring something so special. Just brilliant. And then Matt to come in and be something even more different. It is such a hard thing to do, and yet I think he's fantastic. I think they're all fantastic.
Yeah, Matt does this really amazing thing where first of all, he looks like he's in a new wave band, and he manages to strike this insane counterbalance between incredible boyish curiosity, but then also you sense that he's 900 years old inside.
I think that's the most interesting thing about writing for Matt in some ways. He's the first of the Doctors who actually feels vastly ancient.
Yeah.
They all had the glorious different qualities. Chris Eccleston, sort of hardened soldier who's left the battlefield. David Tennant, glorious white boy, and so on and so forth.
Energy.
But with amazing energy. But with Matt, you actually get the feeling of age all the way through, and just this feeling that he goes all the way back, and that almost for the first time since Tom Baker, the idea that actually the central entity and the body are two slightly different things. This is an alien. This is not somebody that you know. There's something very, very old going on here, which is amazing.
He carries that weight so superbly.
It's great to direct as well. I mean, I think the inherent quality you need to have if you're going to play the Doctor is to be able to look at effectively what is a piece of tape stuck on a lighting stand and look at it and conjure the universe with your eyes. And that's what he does. He look at that piece of tape and it's an exploding TARDIS or sun or whatever you're showing him, and he does that. And he's more valuable to us than any of the special effects we have, which I'm very grateful to have, we have. But his eyes say to us, his eyes make us believe it, and that's what he has.
He took me around the TARDIS and showed me how every button and wheel works. There's a one film.
Don't touch that.
No.
Did he show you that little thing? I remember he showed me the thing from Gallifrey.
Yes.
Just the little plaque saying where it was built.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my, the origin plaque.
And I love the fact this thing has never ever been shown on any TV episode ever. There's just a little plaque on the TARDIS saying which Gallifreyan workshops it was built in.
It's the origin plaque.
What is it? The origin plaque at the top?
Model number.
It just sits there and nobody's ever seen it.
But what's great is Phil has to follow him around the whole time in case he breaks something. Because he has a habit of things falling off. It's, I got it, don't worry.
Yeah.
Stick it back together.
Well, that's what I love about it. I was making Doctor Who when I was a kid out of sticky glue, sellotape, and I'm still doing that.
So
Blue Peter book was how to build a TARDIS. I remember the annual, and I was like, I'll never be old enough. I remember reading and going, I'll never be old enough to be responsible enough to build my own Dalek.
I remember watching Val Singleton teaching us how to make a Dalek out of chocolate cake Smarties. And a Kit Kat. Yes.
Now we've got Mythbusters.
Mark, I want to show, because we have a clip of you from the show.
You're actually going to see what Canton Everett Delaware III does.
You're going to actually see what Canton Everett Delaware III does. Again, I know you guys already know this, but the season premiere of Doctor Who is April 23rd at 9 p.m., 8 p.m. Central on BBC America. And so let's show a little clip of the best of Mark Sheppard.